All right, this is number 44, and it has to do with some kind of a tank that starts leaking at a constant rate for 6 hours, and it started out full. I'm assuming it doesn't actually say that, but I think because it started leaking, it was full, but then only a quarter of the volume was left at noon, 6 hours late. 6 hours later. Sorry. The volume was a quarter at 6 p.m., which was 6 hours after noon. So it wants you to relate, and then this is a linear equation if it's a constant rate of change, okay? Which means, and you know what linear equations are, usually y equals mx plus b. Which means an m you can find and b you can find. So really there are only two variables, y and x. And here they have 3, and it took me a little bit to realize, I see what they're doing here. Okay, here's what it is. The number of gallons of water in the tank at noon, it's not really a variable. It's a variable in that you don't know what the answer is, but it's not actually a variable. So I'm going to do G, that's an amount. You weren't told that amount. You're using G as a placeholder for a number, but G is the amount of water in the tank at noon. Okay. Now then, you lost 3/4 of that tank. Okay. So negative 3/4 of the G is what you lost in 6 hours. And so this is what we're going to do. Negative 3/4 over 6. And we're going to divide it and see what our hourly rate is. So negative 3/4 divided by 6 is negative 3/4 times 1 over 6, which is going to be negative 3 over 24, which is negative 1/8. You are losing every hour 1/8 of that tank. All right. So we're just going to do some really basic figuring out. If you started out with G, okay, you would have to subtract 1/8 of G, so times G, every hour. So every time T is a little bit higher, that's how much you would subtract, okay? So G minus 1/8 GT, and that's going to equal to H. H is the number of gallons of water in the tank that is left. That's the total volume. I don't like that they used H because we're talking about hours, and that's confusing, but that's what they did, and so we're going to go with it. H, I'm going to put like a little V in that. That means the volume of the tank at any given time. V makes more sense to me, but I didn't write this problem. So it wants, I mean, my equation doesn't look like any of these, so I'm going to fiddle around with it until I get it to look like these. So the first thing I notice is that there are no, you know what I'd rather do? Nah, I'm just going to leave it. Just remember H means volume. I'm noticing that A, B, C, and D, they don't have fractions. And so I'm going to go ahead and clear these fractions by multiplying through by 8. And I'm going to see if it's any closer to what I'm kind of feeling. So 8H is equal to 8G, those cancel, minus GT. Okay. I'm noticing that all of these have the G on the right hand side. So what I'm going to do is, and it's isolated, so I'm going to add GT to both sides. And so now I have 8H plus GT is equal to 8G, and voila, that's a D. Alternatively, one thing you could do is go ahead and just say at the beginning, I started to quit, but then I thought, no, I might not see if I'm in a testing situation and stressed. I may not notice as I'm working something out that what the third variable is, or that the third variable isn't an actual variable. You know, it's just a placeholder for a number you don't know. One thing you could do if you didn't know is if you did recognize here that the number of gallons of water at a particular time, the beginning amount, is not something you know, but it's also not something that changes because it is pinpointed down at one time. Okay? Pretend that you do know it. Just say, okay, there's 100 gallons left. 100 gallons is G. And then just alter all of these equations. This is 3H plus G. G, remember G, I just said I know. Plus 100T equals, and G again is 100. So if I knew G, that would be the equation I would be looking at. Here, if I knew G, 4H plus 100T is equal to 400. And here, 4H plus 3 times G would be 300. T equals 400. And last, 8H plus 100T equals, come on you mean, horrible computer, equals 800. Okay, now you can figure out, you can kind of do your math here and go, okay, I had 100. You would find out the unit rate the same way. It would be minus 1/8 of 100, the original amount, times T. Okay, and that equals H, the volume, which again I don't like, but whatever. And now you could actually work through this and figure out which one is equivalent to that. And so you could actually multiply through by 8 similarly to how we did. It would still match up with D, but it would get rid of that extra variable that is slightly confusing. So anyway, that's another way to do it, and we're almost done.